Brooklyn! My world! Give me that Devo gun!
What is this?
Monkey!
It's not delivery, it's a me, Mario. Oh god, that's cringe. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Super Mario Bros. Review. I am very nervous to talk about this because the reviews are very mixed, and I don't like to really look at that many reviews before I do a review myself, but it was kind of hard to because this is kind of a big deal. Now, the original Mario, I believe, came out in 1985. It might actually be a little earlier than that if you count the Donkey Kong game, of course. However, with my personal history, I was born in 1996, so my first Mario game was Super Mario 64. So as far as I was concerned, it was always 3D. I loved Mario 64. I mean, I would spend so much time on just the opening menu screen, stretching his face, and we're talking like just 10 minutes before I would even press start. I would just be sitting there pulling his nose. It was awesome. I mean, I still have my 64, I got my GameCube, my Wii, my Wii U, I got a Switch. I mean, Mario's been a big part of my life, just like every other kid who's alive and breathing. And of course, you can't forget all the spin-offs. I mean, that's where most of the fun is anyways. Mario Golf, Tennis, Mario Party, Luigi's Mansion, Mario Paint, of course, Super Smash Brothers. I mean, hell, that's a whole legacy on its own. And of course, everyone's gonna ask, what's your favorite? For me, Mario Galaxy is probably the one that I play the most and that I love the most. But another part of my childhood that is more infamous for everybody is the first Mario Bros. Movie. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some people watching who are too young to remember. I mean, it came out before even I was born, but in 1993, they came out with a live-action Mario movie that was so bad that Nintendo has literally not allowed Hollywood to make another movie until now. I mean, just let that sink in. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to make the Mario adaptation a dark, gritty, Blade Runner, Fifth Element inspired sci-fi comedy. I mean, it is weird to see those super dark, gritty, dystopian sets. But I gotta admit, it's a huge guilty pleasure for me. I mean, seeing Velociraptor Yoshi and the Goombas, I mean, and the weird, like, evil corporate, Biff, Donald Trump type Bowser. I mean, it's just like, it's a fever dream. It is the definition of a fever dream. The best way I could describe it is if you asked an AI to write a Mario movie if it was directed by Paul Verhoeven in the 80s. I mean, that's basically what it is. So clearly, all these years later, and with that big, stain on the Mario legacy, they couldn't mess it up again. Right? The biggest controversy with this film this time around is the fact that they casted Chris Pratt as Mario. I'm not the biggest Chris Pratt fan in general, and I think that's because I just genuinely don't like the Jurassic World movies all that much. But I had a good feeling, the fact that Nintendo was so closely involved with this, that they wouldn't let someone in who was going to absolutely crap all over it. The thing I was more worried about was actually the animation studio. I have a very weird relationship with Illumination just because I'm a Minion hater through and through. I'm sorry. I just like Cars, Minions is one of those things where every time I see it, I just get so bitter and cynical inside. I'm like, oh God, I hate Minions. I hate Minion memes. Get that shit out of here. But, visually, just from the trailers, I knew that at least the movie was going to be gorgeous. And for what it's worth, Despicable Me is, a good movie. I never saw Life of Pets, and Sing was definitely just not in my ballpark. So I was like, it's a different property. Let's see what they do with it. And of course, the biggest ray of sunshine here is the fact that Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario, actually had a pretty big hand in the production of this movie and had a more of an oversight over everything. So that alone gave it the stamp and seal of approval as far as the Nintendo fans were concerned. So let's go ahead and drop down the pipe. When a pair of young Italian plumbers try and make a name for themselves in Brooklyn, the two discover a portal to the magical Mushroom Kingdom. There, they meet the wacky Nintendo cast of characters and work together to stop the evil King Bowser, who wishes to wed Princess Peach and rule over the world. Yep, that's it. That's the story. That's all we got. So I think it's needless to say that Mario's never really been about strong story or heavy narratives. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a game first and foremost, and its charm comes from its character and its world. And even the character of Mario himself was made out of the necessity to use the amount of pixels they were able to use back in the day to make something that was recognizable as human. From the get-go, Mario was about gameplay first and then story second. So trying to adapt that to a film was already going to be very challenging. You no longer have the fun, stimulating interactivity you get from gameplay to help cover up the fact that it's literally about a dude who jumps on mushrooms. And this is really the root of why so many video game adaptations fails, because when you transfer something from one medium to another, you're taking away a lot of the things that inherently made that thing enjoyable to begin with. But even though there's a really long, nasty track record, we are very slowly seeing an upwards climb as far as the quality and faithfulness of these video game adaptations. I mean, we have the Sonic movie, which, got a lot of praise. We got the Pokemon movie, which you could argue is anime, but it was a game first, technically. And then, of course, The Last of Us, which unfortunately I never got around to reviewing, but I mean, that is a huge step up for video game fans. So to answer the big question, does this film help fight against that narrative that video game adaptations are always shit? And the answer, I think, is yes. From the opening scene, it immediately managed to capture a lot of the magic that I got when booting up a new Mario game for the first time. Illumination really brought their A game, and this looks like the most gorgeous Mario cutscene you've ever seen in your life. There's an amazing sequence at the beginning that makes the streets of Brooklyn look like a 2D side-scrolling platform level straight out of the games. It's very clear from an aesthetic level these animators have a lot of love and wanted to pay a lot of tribute to the source material. The action and blocking and overall visual direction was a 10 out of 10 in my book. I mean, it was gorgeous to look at, it was fun, it was exciting, and honestly, I can't wait to see what else they draw from in the future. You really get a chance to play around in the world, and you get a sense that everyone is having such a fun time in the production. It makes the time spent with it all the more enjoyable as an audience member. As a lot of us suspected, the story isn't really very strong, and there isn't really a lot to be said as far as the narrative is concerned. Character growth and development is almost non-existent. And I don't even mean any of this as a diss against the movie, but it's very clearly written and aimed towards younger children. The theme of brotherhood is introduced very early into the movie, and they make it very clear that Mario and Luigi care about each other very much. Mario, being the older brother, often sticks up for his younger brother Luigi, and I think the idea of flipping the script and having it be a story about Mario saving his brother as opposed to a damsel in distress was a smart move. Seeing that Princess Peach is a character that has grown and had a lot more variety of utility in these games over the years also helps back up that decision and make it feel less obligatory. However, there's a side effect here in that it's kind of disappointing you don't really get to see Mario and Luigi together that much on screen. I mean, if I had to put a number on it, I feel like only maybe 25% of the movie are the Mario brothers actually together. And while yes, it is nice to see Princess Peach not relegated to the traditional damsel in distress, much like the rest of the characters, she's still a one-note cliche. So instead of a princess needing rescue, she's just this kind of like cool badass who's there to lift up the lead character, but for reasons that aren't ever really clearly defined. Each character is introduced so quickly, and you move on to the next thing so fast that you never really get a good sense of why anyone is doing anything. It's very cut and dry, and ultimately it feels like a collection of greatest hits as opposed to an actual story being told. So I guess the real question is this inherently a bad thing considering the source material and considering who the audience is? I mean, after all, not every movie needs to be this super deep, intricate thing. It's okay just to make a popcorn flick that, everyone can just have fun with and have a night out in the theater. So while yes, I do think it was slightly jarring that things moved so fast and there wasn't a lot of character motivation, I could at least say I didn't get bored and it didn't overstay its welcome. Far too often, we're used to these adaptations just taking an absolute steaming hot shit over all the characters and tarnishing the legacy of a beloved property. So I think just having a movie that actually resembles its source material and is fun and enjoyable was enough of a threshold to pass that people are more willing to forgive a lackluster story. So seeing as this isn't very story heavy, the characters aren't particularly deep or layered, let's talk more about the actual performances themselves. So the biggest controversy here was not just the fact that they casted Chris Pratt, but more so that none of the original voice actors from the actual games were really going to play any big part at all. What makes it harder is the fact that these people have been doing this for about 30 years now, and this feels like a historic moment, and the fact that they're not really a huge part of it just kind of rubs some people the wrong way. The main argument that people had against the original voice actors is that they wouldn't have worked because the voices would be too annoying for the entire length of a full feature film, but I kind of disagree with that. So while yes, the stereotypical cartoony Italian accent and the super high-pitched, bubbly princess voice might be grating after a while, but people seem to forget that these are voice actors. I think they have the talent and are capable of adapting and changing those voices into something new, and would have been able to take the part in a new direction and been a part of the history and making the transition onto the big screen. And I think it has less to do with the new performances not being good and more so dealing with the fact that voice actors overall tend to be overlooked, and a lot of people, but especially production studios, assume that A-list talent on screen translates to A-list talent through a microphone, when that really isn't the case. Voice acting is a different discipline than on-screen acting, and I think it's ridiculous that a studio thinks you need Hollywood names to sell something as beloved as Mario to the masses. And just to prove my point, like here's like a thought exercise you can do. So imagine you have two photographs, right? I'm gonna put them in my hands. I'm gonna superimpose this shit. So in one hand, you have a photo of Mario. In the other hand, you have a photo of Chris Pratt. You take these two photos to every continent, right? You ask 100 kids, or just, you know what, not even kids, 100 people of any age. Who is this person? Who is this person? I promise you, Mario is gonna get more recognition than Chris Pratt. I mean, Mario is up there with Mickey Mouse as one of the most iconic images in our collective culture. So you don't need the celebrityism of Chris Pratt from Jurassic World fame to sell your movie. It's a lame corporate marketing angle to try and put some stamp of legitimacy on your product. But with all the politics and behind the scenes stuff removed, let's just get down to brass tacks and talk about how they actually did in these roles. Good news, I'm relieved to say I actually thought everyone for the most part did a pretty good job. Chris Pratt actually brought the character to life in a brand new way and gave him a softer Brooklyn accent that I felt really fit the character. Charlie Day, while also not sounding a lot like Luigi, still managed to put his own spin on it, and the two of them worked really well off each other. I'm pretty sure that Keegan-Michael Key had like a voice filter on him. It was definitely super high pitch. There weren't any artifacts or weird crunchy sounds that you'd usually hear when they manipulate people's voices, but it definitely didn't sound like his natural speaking voice. So some people might argue, oh, you could have anyone play that role, but I mean, you could definitely tell he was having fun with it, and it was never distracting. And again, I wasn't thinking about Key and Peele when I was listening to Toad speak. So I thought he did a fine job. Sadly, the one who left the least amount of impact on me, I actually think was Princess Peach. Don't get me wrong, I love Anya Taylor-Joy. I mean, she's amazing. She's a superstar. I mean, she's been in so many awesome movies, but the characters are such cardboard cutouts, and you know, this version of Peach is so much less bubbly and sparkly and cutesy and much more stoic by comparison that it was hard for her to really shine through. I mean, fortunately, she was given some moments to kind of, you know, playfully tease Mario, and that definitely helped give the character a little bit more life. But for the most part, you know, it definitely felt like anyone could play that role. And I guess it was a character that kind of felt the most removed from what most of our memories of Peach would be. It's tricky because a super ditzy, bubbly, hyper feminine, like princess character could easily, you know, be annoying or just a little too much of a stereotype. But I will say, the new Princess Peach, just like the other characters I mentioned, never annoyed me, never felt like they couldn't exist in that game world or anything like that. So, you know, she was fine. And I'll be very interested to see, you know, what other directions they can take the character in the future, what else they could give the character to do. And then, of course, you got Seth Rogen. Oh my God. Oh, man. Oh, what do I say about that? So Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong is just Seth Rogen. Like, everyone was worried about Mario. Dude, the second that I heard Donkey Kong go, I was uncontrollably laughing. It felt like a meme. Like, it felt like I was watching a G-rated Robot Chicken sketch or, like, you know, a Flash animation on YouTube or something. It just, it was so distracting, but for some by some miracle, for some reason, it kind of worked. And I think that's because Donkey Kong isn't really a character that ever speaks. The only time I can ever remember Donkey Kong speaking is when I play Mario Golf on GameCube, and you can taunt the characters and he just goes, yeah, like he doesn't really speak. He just growls. So you were gonna have to adopt that character anyway. And for what it's worth, Donkey Kong and Mario have a lot of fun rivalry in the movie. I really like seeing them on screen together. So even though you don't really get to see a lot of Mario and Luigi together, all the time spent with Donkey Kong and Mario definitely was a highlight of the movie. So clearly, Rogan didn't ruin it for me. I also appreciate that they, had that rivalry in there because it's kind of a callback to the earlier roots of Donkey Kong, the game, and Mario was an antagonist for him and then vice versa. So it was kind of neat to see them incorporate that into the story. Last and most certainly not least, we have everyone's beloved Jack Black. I mean, come on, give it to him. I mean, we all knew he was going to kill it. He sounded the best in the trailers, but that man has got some pipes. Like, he can hold a note. If you love him, Tenacious D, and you knew there's no way he was going to play Bowser and not have some kind of musical number. Oh my God, he killed it. He killed it. Is the best part of the whole movie. He transforms the most out of all the performances. He really, really made this his own. And I want more. We want more. Bring him back. Bring him back now. And speaking of music and the sound of this film, let's get into that score. Arguably, what's more recognizable and important than the iconography and visual aspects of Mario would be its music. I mean, that music is iconic. We all love it. We all have a favorite track. And they really did a good job of making, orchestral renditions of these iconic pieces of music, and they mixed it so well, and they utilized it in such a fun way. And I think that those are the moments that made me really smile, have an ear-to-ear grin, and just made me smile like a dumbass, was when they would play those iconic tracks, because it really just brought that nostalgia in. That's really where so much of that heart and soul is held. So I could not give enough credit to the score of this movie. Until you get into the needle drops. Now, if you don't know what needle drop refers to, that's basically when they have insert music, licensed music and pop songs. And that is something that has always been a big part of American animated films, like things like Shrek, Cars, literally anything you can think of. It's just like you always got to have these licensed songs. And so I will say I can appreciate that, at least pretty much from what I can remember, all the music they use is from the 80s. And so you have the 80s theme to go along with Mario, because Mario is an 80s property at the end of the day, but it just was gratuitous and unnecessary. Like, when I was worried about this adaptation, that was one of the things on my list, was that there was going to be just a gratuitous amount of insert music. There's probably about 5-6 instances where they play pop music or rock music, and it just, every time they did that, it reminded me I was watching a movie. It ripped me out of the Mario world. It felt very obligatory. How many times have you watched a movie trailer, especially a kid's movie trailer, and it's about dogs, and it's like, who let the dogs, and you're like, oh my God, like, it's 2023, like, we're still doing this, or like there's a scene where all the characters have this very victorious moment and they play, we are the champion. You're just like, it's like a robot. It's like a robot on an assembly line is like placing the music, and it's just so, they used the Kill Bill song in this, that like the badass character intro song. In a training montage, they used I Need a Hero, and I'm like, bro, Shrek owns that song. You cannot. There's a scene where they introduce a very iconic, famous character, and they introduce their world, and they play Take On Me by Aha. And don't get me wrong, I love a lot of these songs. I mean, these are great pieces of music. I just don't think they belonged in this film. And fortunately, there was no modern music, or if they played like, New York, like when they went back to New York, like that would have put the film down like 2 whole points for me. That would have pissed me off. It just, for me, it goes back to what I was saying about using the actors to sell the movie. I feel like these executives who make these movies feel like they need to put in these big recognizable songs to kind of like hook the parents in and like, oh, let's make it fun. I'm like, bro, you had, almost 40 years, maybe even more, of some of the most iconic video game music ever. And they used a lot of it. And I'm like, but there was so much more you could pull from. You did not need to have No Sleep Till Brooklyn from the Beastie Boys playing. You know what I mean? Y'all know what I'm saying? So for some people, it's not a big deal. And again, it's not like these are all iconic, amazing songs. It just felt inappropriate to me and annoying. And it's just one of those, animated kids movie things that quite frankly, I'm just like, not for me. So even though, I ranted about that and, put in my 2 cents, at the end of the day, that is a nitpick. And, I still found myself tapping my foot, here and there, and they're not bad songs. So was it a little annoying? Yeah, but is it, the end of the world? No. Unfortunately, most of my other complaints are going to be spoiler related. So if you don't want any spoilers, I haven't seen it yet, skip to this time code. But if not, I'm going to dig in.
You look ridiculous. Makey or breaky. Oh yeah.
So one thing I found really interesting about this adaptation is that they decided to expand the world of Mario by giving Mario and Luigi an extended family. I mean, they have this big, huge Italian family, and they live in this, tiny apartment. They share a bedroom. I guess they're supposed to be like in their early 20s because they're starting a business. And at first, I was kind of taken back. I was like, oh, this is weird. But I was like, give it a chance. I'm not gonna diss something just because it's not like the games. I don't even know if they ever established their family. I always assumed that Waluigi and Wario were their cousins, but I think I just made that shit up. I think that's just my headcanon. I'm sure someone in the comments are gonna be like, actually. But anyways, I was very curious to see where that was gonna go. And then they introduced this other character who kind of acts as like this bully character. They see him in a diner and he's like, oh, it's the Mario brothers. Like, hey, y'all fucking suck. Like, y'all should eat shit. And y'all are lame. You're never gonna amount to anything. And then, they're like, oh yeah, we'll show you one day. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's gonna be that kind of story. And then Mario and Luigi's parents like, oh, y'all should have been in the family business or doctors or whatever. Plumbers can't wear white gloves and and they're like, oh, it's my dream to be a plumber and I was like, all right, like, it was wrap it up. Like, I was like, okay, whatever. So then they get transported to the Mario world. And for the next hour and 30 minutes, that shit is never brought up or touched up again. And then this is where shit really got under my skin. This is where I'm gonna kind of get into the nitty gritty. So they're fighting Bowser, right? Because the whole thing's Bowser wanted to marry Princess Peach, and Princess Peach, for whatever reason, is just like, oh, hey, random stranger I've never met and who, is kind of weak and can't do anything. Come help me fight this guy for reasons. And, he's like, oh, I gotta save my brother. And then Luigi just sits around the whole movie like, oh, I need to be saved. Like, I can't wait to be saved by my older brother. And, they're like, oh, we're brothers. We love each other so much. We'll do anything for each other. And then, throughout the course of the movie, Mario's like, I'm going to do anything to save my brother. And then Luigi's like, my brother's the best. He's going to save us. And at the end of the movie, he saves them. And it's like, yay. And then Bowser gets teleported to Brooklyn, to the human, like, real world. Bowser is in the city. It just so happens to be on the same block that Mario's family lives. So their heads are peeking out the apartment window like, oh my God, what's happening? And then Mario's and Luigi's like bully from the diner. So he's there. And everyone's like, oh, what the fuck? Because Bowser, this big dragon turtle monster, is like, roar, like shooting fire. And the city's in chaos. It's like Godzilla or some shit. And all these creatures start coming out, like talking mushrooms and shit. And then Mario and Luigi get a power up. They defeat the big bad guy. And then they do that thing in every kid's movie where everyone cheers and claps. And I was like, oh, man. And it's like, I hate it in movies when they're like, everyone's doubting these characters and they have this big moment where all their haters and all their supporters, all their family, everyone in their life sees them accomplish this big thing. And then there's this big hurrah and celebratory moment. It just feels so first draft. Like, it's so cheap and lazy. And my thing is like, okay, I know this is a kid's movie, but you can't tell me that everyone in the city wouldn't be scared shitless and confused. Like, remember, they don't know there's magical alternate universes. Like, they don't know that there's portals to other dimensions or that there's like fantasy creatures. So as far as they're concerned, this is like some apocalyptic existential moment. Or like, as far as they're concerned, Mario and Luigi caused this. Like, they saw them jump out of a portal, and wouldn't they be like, why do they have superpowers, etc.? But no, instead, it's literally that meme on like Reddit and Tumblr where it's like someone tells a super fake sounding story, and then they're like, and then everyone clapped, and I owned everybody, and it's like, oh my god, it's like very cringy. It kind of just took me out of the movie, and it didn't bother me as much until I left the theater and then had some time to think about it, because it's been about a week since I've seen the movie. And when I was writing this review, I was like, well, what was it that bothered me so much? And I was like, oh yeah, the whole ending, the whole crux of the thing. The characters, when you really look at it, they didn't have an arc. How Mario and Luigi are two brothers who wanted to start a business, and then everyone's like, oh, we doubt you can do that. We don't believe in you. And they're like, oh, we gotta believe in ourselves. And they're like, well, we love each other. We'll always look out for each other. One of the brothers gets kidnapped. He's like, all right, well, I'm gonna work hard to save him. He saves him. Everyone watches him save the day, and then everyone claps. And I'm like, this isn't a movie. Like, this is what people are talking about when they say that this movie is like not a movie. It's just a highlight reels of cool moments. And again, that isn't inherently a bad thing, but I'm like, okay, I'm not a writer. Okay. I'm not, because everyone's like, oh, well, could you do better? And I'm like, probably not. But if I had to fix this, right, this is probably where I would go. So instead of having it to where everyone sees them save the day, take this kind of like Wizard of Oz, Spirited Away type angle, where the characters experience this super otherworldly event, and no one would ever believe them, but they're able to take away the lessons they've learned from that experience and take it with them and utilize it in their actual lives. They have this newfound confidence in themselves because they've proved to themselves that they can do this thing. Everyone laughs at them, but now they don't even care anymore because they had this big experience, and they apply it and they better their own lives, instead of having it be like this instant gratification of, oh, everyone saw them be badasses. It's like, no, that would have been a more natural progression. Or honestly, if we want to trim the fat even more, cut out the family and bully aspect altogether. Make it Mario and Luigi are orphans or whatever. They want to start this business, but their city's becoming less and less recognizable. It's becoming harder and harder, more cutthroat. And even though it's this place that they loved and grew up, they realize it's no longer their home. And so they find this magical place. They found somewhere where they feel like they belong and they can build a new life for themselves. Like, make it like this metaphor for like immigration almost. And like, so they build this new lives for themselves in the Mushroom Kingdom, and there they can be heroes, and they find new people they can love. They make their own family. They it's like in Joe Dirt when they're like, home is where you make it. Like, it's like that shit. You know what I mean? So yes, these are still cliche, but it doesn't feel as lazy and broken and just weird, if that makes sense. Different people are going to be more sensitive about these kind of things, and of course I'm looking at this through a critic lens. I can't turn a blind eye just because I felt all warm and fuzzy when I heard the Mario music. You know what I mean? I think I would have been more willing to forgive them having each character just be an excuse to introduce something from the game, and each place was just a reference and just there to set up some set piece. But I think that, and then everyone claps ending just really got under my skin. Don't introduce these new characters and this new element that aren't even from the games if you're not even really gonna use them. Another thing that was kind of spoiler territory that I wanted to talk about was the line where Princess Peach is looking up into the stars, and she has a monologue about how there's so many other worlds out there and all the implications that can mean. Because for me, I saw that as a triple meaning. Number one is in the movie, obviously Mario's from the human world. Peach didn't really know where she came from, and so there's this element of like, oh, there's so many other worlds out there, and like they're the Brooklyn, and then there's the Mushroom Kingdom, and also too Yoshi's Island, Donkey Kong World, etc. But then there's another angle which is more meta, and that's about all the different Mario games. There's Mario Galaxy, there's Luigi's Mansion, the Mario Olympics, so many other ideas to play with. That was kind of the meta aspect. And then there's the third one, which is the most ambitious, and that's even more meta, and that's talking about all the different Nintendo worlds. You have, Star Fox, Legend of Zelda, Metroid, Kirby is a big one that everyone's asking for now. And so her bringing up that line really got me thinking, and I couldn't help but get really excited at the prospect of any of these other projects coming to life. And I won't lie, I was kind of sad that Yoshi did not make an appearance. I mean, there were some Yoshis, but I mean, my boy Yoshi, I mean, look at this guy. Look at him. I mean, he's precious. I love him. You know, if they make Yoshi's story, I'm gonna be first in line to see that shit. And now for the obligatory cringe, my Yoshi impression. Losu! Blam! Losu! Blam! Losu! Blam! Wow! Blam! Losu! Wow! Blam! Blam! Was that horribly cringe and unbearable? Yeah. But is it a little impressive? I think so. I think I got it. Nintendo and Illumination, this is my official audition for the role of Yoshi. Please contact me at my phone number. It's 972. Well, it might seem like I went in really hard and tore this film a new asshole, but I promise you when I say I actually was very pleasantly surprised and had a really fun time. My expectations were super low. No, not because of the 1993 movie, but because, you know, I'm not a big Minions guy. I wasn't sure how I felt about the cast, and I just knew that Mario being not very narrative story heavy was going to be kind of hard to adapt, but all things considered, this is a pretty tried and true Mario movie. It had a lot of the things people wanted to see. It represented the characters faithfully. You got to see those worlds in a beautiful new light. And overall, you know, everyone in the theater was clapping, cheering. Kids were laughing their asses off. You know, none of the jokes were too cringy or annoying. It didn't have any, you know, stupid poop or fart jokes or burp jokes. And, you know, it's been a while since I've seen a movie that I could turn off my brain and just smile and have a good time. And that's worth something, I think. But even with that being said, I know for a fact on a second viewing, you know, going in again, I don't think the same tricks are gonna work. It was fun, but this really is more of a one and done. I mean, if I were to watch it again with, you know, a friend or someone, you know, I would still enjoy it for sure. But I think I'm more excited to see what's gonna come out next and what else they can do with this world. So this was a good start. They you know, got off on the right foot, and I think that's something worth being proud of, especially, again, considering the history of all these bad adaptations. But I'm not going to give it a pass just because, you know, it gave me those warm, fuzzy feelings. Because, again, I know that those aren't going to last once the nostalgia kind of fades away. And, again, that ending really annoyed me. So 5 being considered mid or average, 10 being masterpiece. I think 6 might be too low, but I also think 7 might be a little too high. So I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to go for, you know, right in the middle. I'm going to give this a very enthusiastic 6.5 out of 10. I do recommend it. I think it's a lot of fun. Bring your friends. If you have kids, bring your kids, obviously, duh. This is a people pleaser, a crowd pleaser. I can't wait to see what they do next, and I think this about wraps it up. I mean, if they make a Yoshi story, I will be first in line to see it. But until that happens, thank you for watching.
What the fuck? You fucker! You cocksucker! You don't give a shit, and I've been sitting around getting sick of your attitude! You fucker! You fucking bitch!